All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, and that was fun. It looks like I'm trying a different streaming service today, or was, and that did not work. So, good morning, and that was fun. It looks like I'm trying a different streaming service today, or was. Oh, that was myself coming through my audio there. All right. Let me get a couple things housekeeping wise cleaned up since I broke the other stuff here. I want to get the other chat information put in here. Let me get the right chat going here instead of what I had before. Just a moment. How's everybody doing today? Is everybody signed up for tomorrow's live stream for, or not live stream, the conference tomorrow? The Home Assistant conference will be tomorrow. I showed this before. If you have Home Assistant up, you can see the Home Assistant conference link in the configuration section here. So click it there, and then this will give you information on the Home Assistant conference. And that's tomorrow. They've got 5 to 6 speakers in each track. The keynote is going to be Paulus. He's going to do the opening and closing keynote, and then, of course, all kinds of sessions. Costs $1, US dollar. That's because they're using this platform here, and this platform is the streaming platform, and this dollar covers the cost of that, from what I understand. So here's a whole bunch of stuff on here to watch. Pick your favorite flavor and go enjoy it. I think it'll be kind of fun. I've never been to virtual or in-person Home Assistant conference, so this gives me the ability to attend, even though I've never been to any one of them before. All right, so it looks like we have some folks up. I just want to make sure everything's working. So if you are seeing this okay, and I'm watching myself on my phone here, it looks okay. Just ping me a chat or whatever so I know what's happening. So today we want to talk about Grafana, and I'll answer questions and whatever else we want to bring up. So let me go back over here and just bring up the dashboard. It's awful quiet in the chat today. Awful quiet in the chat today. So as far as what I want to talk about in Grafana today is starting with InfluxDB. I think there are a number of different options for feeding Grafana from Home Assistant. I happen to be using InfluxDB. And InfluxDB, for those that don't know, is a scalable data store. It's basically a time-based database, which is awesome. It just makes tick marks within the database for every event that occurs. And then whenever you graph this on a time-based graphing tool like Grafana, it just puts it in the right place for you. Not a lot of extra work you have to do. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have Grafana, or an Influx and Grafana installed, as a matter of fact. So we can just go to Influx and make sure that you have this installed, which I do. Some of the configuration options I have are really nothing. It's just defaulted. What I do is I make sure that I have this in the sidebar. So when you look over in the sidebar here, it shows up, and then start on boot, because nothing like losing a bunch of data because you restarted Home Assistant and didn't realize that your database wasn't running. So how did my game turn out? We won. I did not see what ASU did to UFA today, or last week, or was it last night? Here's the thing with the whole, and we're talking about U.S. college football. The whole thing about college football is this season is just a mess. UT up in Austin, Texas, University of Texas, their season pretty much is over now. They had to cancel a bunch of games. Our game that was supposed to be played today, Texas A&M, that's done. They're going to replay that on the 19th. So at least we get to play it. And that's nice. But in terms of just college football in general, the season just is a mess. You have teams that haven't played enough games to make conference game or playoff games. Texas A&M was ranked 5th. They're still ranked 5th, which is one spot below where they need to be in the playoffs. But there aren't enough games for people to understand how well the teams are performing to be able to rank teams, well. So this stream is not about college football, but yeah, and Raspberry, yeah, you're right. A lot of it's just sports in general is a mess. I'm hoping with what we're seeing out in the world with the vaccine stuff and whatever, that's going to help a lot, help us get things back to normalish. So, yeah, so I'll watch whatever game happens to come on TV. That's about it. I won't see anything else because there's nothing else going on. So I tried to use a platform today to stream into multiple services, and I'm not sure why it didn't start up. I tested it extensively a little bit earlier and it worked fine. And then when I went live, of course, it didn't work. So we'll stick with YouTube only. I'm going to start streaming over on Twitch with this platform in addition to YouTube. So that'll be kind of fun. But we'll just go with the tried and true today, and just talk through our stuff. All right. So Influx, and make sure you're asking me questions in chat as we're going along here or in Discord. If you're in Discord directly on my Discord server, if you put in ask, if you put an exclamation ask and then the question, it'll show up in the live stream questions channel. And it's easier to catch that when the chat's scrolling, which obviously it's not scrolling that much this morning. So anyway, yeah. You always wanted to get this to work. Well, that's good. It's good. We'll get it to work. You're talking about Grafana or Influx, Raspberry. I'm assuming both. Install Influx, and then in the Home Assistant configuration, and let me just bring this up here real quick. I always like to bring up my configuration files off the live streams to make sure I don't give away the farm. Interesting. I'm hearing myself still. I think my phone is still streaming. It is. Check that out. All right. Live TV, yay. So I'm going to show you, let me just go into Influx. That all looks good. That looks good. You can't read it. I will X this out for the moment. All right. So if you look at your configuration.yaml, when you put in Influx, I do have an entry here for Influx Db, and my host name is my local host. You can put in the local IP. The port is defaulted. So if you look over at the port, if you look at the port here under configuration, it's 8086, which is what I have defaulted here. So there's my port, my database, and you have to build a database in here, and then my Influx user, Influx pass, and then default measurement. So it's going to put everything in as a state if it doesn't have a default measurement for it. So one of the other things we want to do is we want to go to, and let me do this again off screen for a minute. We want to make sure that we have our database created in Home Assistant or in Influx that we're going to be using. And you do that by going to the Influx Db web UI. And over here on the left-hand side, there's a bunch of configuration options, and you can also do some exploration as well. So here's my local database, and under Influx Db admin, which is what I have to be careful about here. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You create a database. You can name the database. So I'll call this YouTube test. There won't be anything in it for me to show you this way, but we can create the YouTube database. And now it's got a retention policy of infinity, autogen is default. So I'm not going to go a lot into the actual workings of InfluxDB because it's pretty simple. You just need to have a database to store your stuff in. And then of course you create a bunch of users. You can create a user here and you can give it password or give it permissions. So one of these here is probably the user I'm using for Home Assistant. So when you look at configuration.yaml, make sure you have the influx user influx pass that you set here under InfluxDB admin and then users. So create a database, create user, and then you can do that. You can play with the permissions here. Again, I'm not going to go into super detail on it. I'm going with default. I have to set the disclaimer out every time I talk about stuff like this. Is your level of risk is whatever you want it to be. I have a username and a password on each of these users. And I realize you're seeing these on the live stream, but it doesn't really matter. You can't see the password, number one. Number two, it's inside my network and lockdown, so you're not going to get to it. But your level of risk on how you set these things up. Security is everyone's responsibility. So make sure that you're doing best practices when you're doing stuff anywhere on a network or a server or anything that has access to anything else. I mean, basically just security. When you leave the place you live or whatever, you probably lock the door. So it's the same thing with network security, server security. Just lock the door, lock it down as best you can. All right, well, that was a blah, blah, blah about that. Let's move on to the next step here. Now, one thing you can do once you have Influx installed, before you go start messing with Grafana, just to make sure that you have everything up and running the way you want it to be, is you can come down here to this Explorer and you can start just kind of building a query. So I'm going to add a new query here. And they have all these meta query templates and things you can use. You can come down here and you can look at the different databases. So if I just want to see all of the measurements that currently are in my Influx database, I can click the show measurements and then submit the query. And I have to specify the database name. So let's specify the database name. And it's the one the one that you either just created or the one that you're using for all your Home Assistant stuff. So if I submit this query, I want to switch to table mode so I can see it all. Every one of these returned values is going to be a return value that has been stored in your database. It doesn't make these things up as defaults. There's no default value within the Influx database that you created. So everything here is something that one of my sensors or one of my entities has stored within the database. So this tells me that I'm getting things. Now I can come down here to actually start kind of building a query here. So these are the databases on the left-hand side. And I'm going to go with Home Assistant Autogen. That Autogen is the database that generates, that's the default database that everything goes into for me. And I want to look at a temperature in Fahrenheit somewhere. So I'll click the Fahrenheit. So again, these are all the measurements it shows. These are the measurement types that show in the database. So if I click on one of these, now these are all the entities, or the fields, the fields that are available. So click value. And now this is every field that has the entity Fahrenheit, or every entity that has the field of I'm sorry, yeah, Saturday morning. Every entity that has a entity type of Fahrenheit, and then of course the value that goes with it. And you can just see it goes through here. So I have a few entities. If I look at something a little bit less, let's see if I can find anything in here that will narrow it down a little bit more. So we'll look at UVI probably. There's only one value, so or only one device. So this one device has a UVI value. Anyway, the point is what I'm trying to show here, without getting too much into all of the yeah, Razzie, why are you yelling at me there? So when you go to Autogen, nothing is showing. That's because nothing has been entered into your database. Once you create, and let me ask you, Razzie, are you actually My garage door's open. I don't know if y'all heard that or not, but my garage door thing opened in the background there. Squirrel. Are you actually, did you just put in this Influx Raspberry, or has it been in there a while? Because if it's not been in, if you just did it, there's not going to be any values potentially stored in there. And let me just make sure I'm telling the right story here. Let me check another setting and make sure that there isn't something else that has to be added in terms of what goes in. I think it defaults to everything. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it defaults to throwing everything in the database. There are ways to limit the things that go into the database. So if you don't want to have every one of your entities going into the database, you can limit that. And I'm looking for the settings for that. And my whole desk is coming alive. As Dr. Z says, my Alexa and my Google stuff are talking. My phone's ringing. It's going crazy here. Influx. So I think under the Influx DB, and we can just take a quick look here. You can limit what goes into the database. So you just installed it. So yeah, you probably don't have anything going into it yet. The Home Assistant has to start writing to it first before you're going to see anything. And I'm just going to look at the integrations page just to make sure I'm not telling you any lies about it. So exclude. All right, so here you go. I don't have any of this set. So I don't have an exclude set or an include. So I have everything going into my database, but you can include specific things you want to put in the database and exclude other things. The neat thing about Influx is over time, there's data that builds up, but you can set retention policies. And again, I'm not going to go into that detail because I personally don't understand it that well. But you can set retention policies that start taking some of that older stuff and compressing it down into bigger time frames. So you have, let's say now you have a data point every second. Maybe 6 months from now, you want a data point instead of every second, maybe every minute. And then a year from now, you want that same data point to show up every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes. So you can start setting the retention policy to start building that out and then start dropping stuff off as it gets really old. So I just put everything in there. I haven't had an issue. I don't have any idea what my disk space is, but it's not at all an issue at all as far as storing this stuff in Influx, which is what makes it really nice about a time-based database, is it just starts filling it up. It's designed for this, and it stores very minimal stuff that you use for that. All right, drink of water, please. Good stuff. Ice cold water. What's the temperature in Texas today, right now, at this very moment? Let's just take a look and see what the temperature is. You know, I could ask my devices. I always go to this to see. All right, it's 55 degrees and 53 heat index, which means it's low humidity. Oh, no, it's not. 44%, 44 degrees dew point. So it's cool outside. Feels warm in the house here. Okay, as I squirrel along here and jump off to things that don't matter. Home Assistant, AutoGen. Now, Raspberry, on yours, do you, if you select measurements, just over here under, where is it at? Meta query templates, and you just select the measurements, does anything show up yet? And make sure you have your database name in here, or obviously it won't show anything. The other thing is to make sure that your username and password. Oh, and obviously if you do something within configuration.yaml, you have to restart Home Assistant for that particular type of entry. They've made a lot of strides in being able to restart different parts of Home Assistant without restarting the whole core. But in this case, you're gonna have to restart the whole thing to get the Influx information in there. All right, so we do have data coming into our database in Influx. And if you're using a different database engine, that's fine too. This is the one I'm familiar with, so that's the one we're going to be going over today. All right, so now we have data in here. What are we going to do with it? I want to display it in all kinds of different ways. And so, again, if you go over to Supervisor, Add-on Store, search for Grafana, you can install Grafana. I already have it installed. Again, add-on starts during boot, shows in the sidebar so I can see it over here on the left. Because when you have it in the sidebar, you don't have to come into the add-on. That's true of any add-on that shows up on the sidebar. You don't have to come over to the add-on through Supervisor, add-on, and then click on Open Web UI. You can just go straight to the left bar and add it. Lots of documentation in here. Configuration-wise, what I have done, and if you've seen my Grafana videos, you've seen me talk about this. I have a number of plugins that I use for different things. And those plugins are the discrete panel, the status map, the clock, and then the simple JSON data source, and then WinRose panel. And I use those for various things, obviously, within here. If you don't put these things in here, then you're not going to be able to use some of the functionality that is in my videos. But again, I talk about that specifically in the videos. Hey, Raspberry, make sure that in your Influx, you look at the log and see if there's anything going on with that. Make sure it's started up. This is me using Chronograph, and Chronograph is part of the default or part of the install of Influx and Home Assistant. So Chronograph is the thing that the UI that I'm using to do the work that I showed you a minute ago. But just check the log to make sure that you don't have any funny errors in here. Okay, let's go over to Grafana and let's see what all kinds of business we can do here. I'm going to start from scratch here in just a minute, but the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have created or configured a data source. And I already have it done, but I will show you that I want to, and this goes to show you the different types of databases you can use: Prometheus, Graphite, OpenTSDB. I'm using Influx. There's a bunch of other ones. You can actually use SQL-based databases. I actually use a SQL-based database for another install that I have for work-related stuff. So that one I do know works as well. All these work. I just am familiar with the SQL version, and I'm familiar with Influx. I mean, there's just a tons of data sources. So you could pull data from a lot of these different things. I use Mongo as a database, but I don't use it with Grafana yet. New Relic, Oracle, ServiceNow. I mean, just look at all this stuff you can do with it. Anyway, make sure you add an Influx data source. You're going to set the URL, and the URL is going to be the URL for the Influx data source when you go to Influx. So mine would actually be this little part right here. And I set it up as the URL. And this talks directly to the container it's in if you're running HASS.io supervisor type Home Assistant install. And then you can set your username and password. Make sure you select your database. Let me just make sure that, again, I'm doing this right. And I'm not telling you stories here. Let me look at my username and password off to the side here. Give me 1 second. Home Assistant. Would you all like me to sing? Home Assistant. No. So who else is on the video this morning? Anybody besides Raspy? Only hearing from Raspy this morning. Let me take a quick look at my configuration for Grafana, and I'll show you the Home Assistant, or I'll show you. Let me just make sure that that URL is correct. It's changed a couple times, and that's why I want to just double check and make sure that I actually have the right URL set up for what I just showed you. Because there's nothing like trying to build this thing out and then you put this thing in that some random dude tells you how to do, and then it's wrong, and then you can't get it to work. So double checking here. All right, so I'm going to show you, I'm actually going to do this. I was a little bit off on that. So under your, where are we at? Under your URL, you can go directly to the add-on address here. So if if you look up here, you have this AO, whatever yours happens to be, and you can go directly to that and then the port number, which is 8086 by default. So that is your URL. Don't put the IP address and other stuff in. This goes directly to the container if you're on the same host with Grafana and your Influx. If you're running Influx on something else, which you can do, make sure that you are putting in the URL of your Influx Db server and then all the other stuff. You can set your auth based on whether you have SSL, TLS, all that stuff. I have that all checked off. Then of course I have my database as Home Assistant, my user that I'm using that I set up, and then my password. And my HTTP method is post. I believe that's a new thing that occurred recently because everything stopped working a couple of updates ago, and I had to go back in here and set this to post because it didn't work without doing that. So make sure this is set to post. And then I don't have any of this stuff right here. You can do other things with this. So there's your data sources. Make sure this is your data source that I'm gonna use today. And so make sure that's all set up and working correctly. And then of course you can do a test. When you do save and test down here, if you have everything right, it should return a green value telling you have a test or you have a good connection. All right, so I have that now. And let me go back to dashboards. I have a whole bunch of dashboards here, but I'm gonna start with a fresh one just so everyone can see it. So I'm gonna create a new dashboard, and it automatically puts you in this panel right here. And this panel is where you start adding in your information. So get some of these windows out of the way on the other screen. Perfect. Okay, just a moment here. All right, so let's add, one of the basic things we want to add, I always like to watch my temperatures. So that's a super simple one to add. So I'm going to add a new panel. And over here on the right-hand side, you have a whole bunch of options. First of all, let's just call it temperature. I'm going to call it outside temperature. And this outside temperature is going to be in the form of a graph. Now you can choose any of these things. And I do have some of these where I have like a single stat where I just want to see the number and I don't want to see all the rest of the stuff or all the graph and everything goes with it. Gauges, tables, heat maps, and then of course these like the win rows, the status map, and discrete. Those are all. It says unsigned here, so it just means it's an external plugin. Again, your level of risk is what you're comfortable with. Use best practices and all that. These are out there under the plugin area of Grafana. So my assumption is, I get in trouble for assuming something, but my assumption is if it's listed under some of the main Grafana stuff, it's probably okay. So I haven't had any issues with it, and that's the point here. If you see unsigned, don't worry about that. These won't be under your default Grafana install anyway, unless you install those little things under the configuration that I showed you earlier. Okay, so I'm going to call this one a graph, and obviously you see it names it outside temperature. Now there's two ways to do the query options down here, and I always go with the UI type editor to start with. And let me show you something else here too. Make sure that you're always choosing the correct database or data source for the query that you're trying to run. I have a few of these that I've played around with, so I have multiple data sources, but I'm going to stick with default, which is the one I use for Home Assistant. Hey Raspy, did you ever get any data into your Home Assistant, by the way, or into your Influx, curiously? Okay. So I want to select a measurement. You can go multiple ways here, but if you select a measurement first, and let's say I want to look at Fahrenheit because I'm in the US, so I use Fahrenheit. If I click on degrees Fahrenheit here, all of my entities that have a degree Fahrenheit are going to plot on this graph. I don't want to do that because I'm only looking for the outside temperature, just one item, right? So now we've narrowed this down. And if anyone is familiar with query languages at all, this is probably pretty basic. But you want to select either a domain. So if in Home Assistant, a domain is like all of the same type of thing. So one thing that comes to mind is like, well, let's just look. If we select domain, what do we have for options? We have sensor. So everything that's coming into Grafana from Influx is a sensor. So if I click sensor, it's still going to put all this stuff on here. I don't want to do that. I hardly ever do that, but it is an option for you. I just don't have anything in here other than sensor, so it's kind of pointless. But what I do use most of the time is entity ID. And then with entity ID, now I have all of my entities that have a Fahrenheit type of measurement that shows out of Influx as my data source into Grafana as an option here. So I'm going to look for my outside temperature. And I know that that one is this WH65B temp F. And so now I have plotted my first graph, or I have created my first graph on here. And this is just the temperature from one of my sensors. Now, if you want to add, and well, let's continue, and then we'll get a little more involved here. So some of these other values I don't worry too much about unless I want a specific type of action. So I always leave time as the interval. Interval is this selection up here. The fill, if there's nothing there, I just let it fill a null value, and then you can come over here and do some stuff with that. Format as a time series. I always leave it as a time series because what I'm doing is I'm looking at whatever this sensor is over time, and then I can name this, WH65B or whatever I want to call it, right? I already say outside temperature, but if I was plotting multiple things on here, then it would give this particular value, or this line would be the value that I give here in the alias. All right, so this is in its most basic form what this looks like. If you wanted to see what this query looks like as a query, you can click on the little pencil here. And now what you're doing is selecting mean value from the Fahrenheit type of measurement where the entity ID equals this, and time filter is this time filter, and we're grouping by time interval. Again, you don't necessarily need to do that for a simple query like this. Uh-oh, meltdown. Well, good luck, Rasby. I have been there many, many times. Thanks for stopping by. We'll be here a little bit. We'll be here a little bit today, so if you get a chance, come on back. Anybody else out there today? I'm just not seeing much in the way of chat. Lots of stuff here in terms of crickets. I'm just checking Discord real quick. I don't see anything there either. All right, so we have outside temperature plot. Now, what do we want to do? We want to make it look like this or something else? So what we can do is right now we're set for lines. So let's just toggle a few of these things and see what it does. I always like to experiment, and so there's nothing wrong with making it look the way you want it to look. And this is personal preference for you from this point. So if I want to say, I just want to look at bars, now I have all these bars. And everywhere you see a bar, this is a point that has been entered into the Influx database. So it's pretty consistent. A few gaps here and there, but my weather station for the most part reports every 16 seconds. So I'm storing a value here every 16 seconds. So bars, yeah, it looks nice, but that's not my favorite. So I'm going to turn that back off and go back to lines. And then you can change the line width. And actually what I want to do with this is you can do an area fill. You can do a fill gradient. Well, that got rid of it, didn't it? The fill gradient kind of starts filling from the top down. And so you have this kind of, waterfall looking effect or whatever. And then I want to add points. So now I have points along here. So let's just take lines off in general. Now we just have points. So we have a single graph or single point, a single line with points on it. And we can change the point radius down to, let's say, 0.5. And now you just have points. And then stack and null value. So let's just say, see how we have some gaps in here? You can take this null value and change it to connected. And that, of course, made a liar out of me. If we do lines, what lines will do is lines will take that null value and connect it. And you kind of see it a little bit here. If I get rid of connected and put it back to null, now you only get the spots where there was something going on in the database. So at whatever time this is, 9:43, there was a a plot on the database, and over here at 9:44 there was another one, but there was a little gap here. If you connect it, now you have this little space here where it takes this value and connects to this one and goes on. So again, that's a personal preference. And notice what happened when I zoomed in on that, it brought that graph in as well. But here's my temperature swing over the last 24 hours. So let's say you want to add a second value for whatever reason. So let's say, in fact, let me do a second graph. So now what we want to do is we want to apply this, and let me back up a step here. One of the things you can do also here is I want to change this unit to temperature and change it to Fahrenheit. And now you can see that the graph automatically sets the type of value this is. If you do this with seconds or something like that on a time-based thing, it will actually, it'll go from minutes to seconds to hours. So if you have something that's thousands of seconds, it'll change it to minutes or hours on this left-hand side, which is really nice. That's what happens when you change the unit. I don't do anything with the y-axis, just the left y, the right y. There's nothing here, and of course the x-axis. You can show or hide any of these things if you want. It's kind of, for me, it's kind of pointless to not have the time when these things occurred, so I always leave the x-axis on here. And then you can do you can set the x and y axis values. So let's say, or the y values, minimum and maximum. Let's say I only want to see when temperatures are between 50 and 80. That's not even very good, is it? So let's go back down to 30, and let's go to 100. Well, that's not working either. Let's get rid of those and start that again. All right, so my minimum here is around 44 and my maximum is around 73. So was I in the wrong field? Let's try it again. So I should be able to put the graph at 100 and the graph at 30. And it should show. Huh. So somebody tell me what I'm doing wrong here. You can set the bounds of the graph for whatever reason, and it may be because of something set up here. It is not showing me when I set the scale. So I would like to troubleshoot that, but we'll move on to do some other things. What you can also do is you can set thresholds. So let's say the temperature is greater than 50. Now you can see right here that it automatically places a line. So you can change the color, either critical, warning, or okay, which would make it green. Or you can do custom, change the fill color, and let's say I want it some sort of orange looking thing, but I only want it to be certain transparency. So now I just bring that transparency down. So anytime I go above this value that I've set here, it automatically sets a threshold. And if you apply it, now you can see on this graph, and we can drag it out full width if we want to, that you can see that I'm concerned when it's this range right here. And you can do that with any of the sensors that you create. Questions? Any questions? Any comments? The chat is definitely quiet unless I'm looking at the wrong one. Let me just send a test. Hello. Yep. Oh, that's the right one. All right, so we've got that one. And then, of course, you need to save your dashboard if you, and I'll call this YouTube test live video. How about that? YouTube live video, we'll just save it. And if you change the time range here, let's say to the last 12 hours, and you save it, you'll notice it asks you if you want to save the current, let me try my mouse highlighter. I always forget that guy. It'll ask you if you want to save the current dashboard's time range. So if I save it like that, every time I go to this dashboard, it's only going to show the last 12 hours. You can always change it, but it defaults to whatever you set there. Okay, now we're back in the dashboard. So what do we do next? We need to go back, and I want to add another panel. So I can click on this right here and add another panel. So let's add another temperature panel, but I'm going to do one with multiple items on it. So same kind of thing we did before. Let's give it title of inside temperatures. And of course, when you take focus away from the box you're editing, then it automatically changes the title. And the selected measurement, again, is going to be Fahrenheit. And we're going to do entity ID again, of course. And my value here is going to be, let's do, let me find something that is going to be pretty close to normal. So let's do upstairs temperature. And already you can see what's going on here. You have these little dots way spread out. But we'll fix that in a minute. So now what we're going to do, and this is my Nest thermostat. For those of you who have played with the Nest stuff, this only updates when there's an actual significant change in the Nest temperature or completely at random. I haven't figured it out. So I don't know when these update, but it tends to have to be a significant thing. So we'll fix this here in a second. But I want to add another query because I want to compare upstairs versus downstairs on the same graph. So I'm going to come down here and add a second query. And I'm going to select a measurement called Fahrenheit again. And my entity ID is going to be, if I can find it easily, downstairs temperature. So now it's very hard to tell what's going on here. We have all these blips and blops all over the place. So that's fine. One thing, as I mentioned in the last graph, is we want to name this one upstairs. And we want to name the other one downstairs. So now you can see here, and you can click these on or off. Double click brings them both back. But it's hard to see. So we want to make some corrections over on the right hand side here to make this a little bit better. I'll leave lines. And I'm going to turn on points. And now they're a little bit bigger because my point radius is 2. But now I want to do this where I'm doing the stacking and null value. I want to use the null value as connected. And now right away you get an immediate better view of what's going on. This is over the last 12 hours. So let me change my graph to 24 hours. And again, you see that these Nest thermostats only update I guess the term is very infrequently. So very infrequently. So this was at 12:09 yesterday, and then it updated at 11. So almost 11 hours later is when the Nest updated. So I find this quite interesting. And this, of course, you have this update here at 12:09, and you have another update at 12:10. So that's 10 hours. The API is working. It just, whenever Nest pushes updates from your devices to the pub sub that we're all using now, or we should be using now, that's when Nest updates. So anyway, now we have a comparison chart between upstairs and downstairs temperatures. And we can finagle with this stuff. You can do bars, so you can have these bars pop up on the screen. To me, that gets a little noisy, so I don't use that. You can adjust your line width here. You can make those lines massive. On the previous graph where I have an update every 16 seconds, the points themselves actually make the line very visible. So I could take this line width and make it nothing, and then you just have this kind of fill area. So let's just make it 2 for now. It makes a nice solid visible line. And then my point radius, I don't need it quite so big. So let's make it, I always like a 0.5. Well, let's make it a little bit more. Let's make it a 1. And so you can kind of see where all the different updates are. And then for fill gradient, you can change to 0. So that means that this whole fill from top to bottom is going to be the same transparency level. You can change your fill gradient like I showed you before to make it more pronounced at the top part of the fill and less as you go down farther. Or you can turn it off entirely. So we have no fill gradient at all. And then area fill, you can also change this to make it really strong. And you can see what's happening when you have multiple items on the same graph. You start, especially down here, you start overrunning each other. So I tend to, when I'm doing multiple graphs, unless there's some reason I want to see the fill gradient, I just tend to turn that off and just stick with the lines. And it's so much easier for me to see. Again, this is a lot of personal preference, how you want to do these things. And then, of course, come down here. Now my internal temperatures, and I'm going to try this again. If it makes me, if it fails again, I'm going to be embarrassed, but I have used this many times. If my inside temperature is above 90, there's going to be a problem. If my you know what I'm doing? It's backwards. Why would max be on the bottom and min be on the top? All right, that's the problem. Let's say my minimum is 50, or let's say 60, and my maximum is 90. So now, I just can't believe that. Why is it backwards? Okay, whatever. So we have, now that we've done that, our minimum temperature is 60 and our maximum temperature is 90. Our inside temperatures in a environmentally controlled environment, like human inhabited or, normal inhabited environment, should be in this range, I would hope. Could be less for some people, more for others, I guess. 90 is pretty hot inside, especially with no airflow going. So I set my minimum and maximum. Just remember they're backwards here. And then we can do something I didn't show you before. We could do a table of values. So now you have your table of values, and then you could share them to the right. And then you can show these values. It's going to be min, max, average, and current. Let me get a drink here. And you can show all these different things on a table. Average. So one's kind of fun is the average over time. You can see whatever this time is based here. You can see what your average temperature is. When you do to the right, it puts it over here, obviously. And if you do a table, it puts it here, but then stretches it way across. You could do all these values on the bottom. Turn everything on. And depending on your graph. So if we apply this now, and our graph is really, if we narrow our graph size down a little bit, it makes sense maybe to have this on the bottom. But if you only have one value and you have a few of these, you may not be able to see it as well. So I'm going to go back and edit this, and we will put it back to turning that to just one value. We won't use the table at all. And I will just show current, because if I want to look at something and see what the current temperature is, right now upstairs 69, downstairs 69.5. So when you click on save, it takes you back over to the dashboard. No, that's a lie. When you click on save, it just saves it. When you click on apply, it takes you to the dashboard without saving it. So when you apply, make sure you also click the save over here. Okay, so that is those two items. Do we have any questions? All right, so Bob is using Maria and Influx. You're using both Maria and Influx? How are you sending data to both of those from Home Assistant, Bob? And all right, so these are two different types of graphs. Now you can, when you're on the graph page here, you can drag and drop these however you want. It's a reflexive designed screen, so when you move them around, you're going to have stuff going here, there, and all over the place and everywhere. I think if you try to put it down here, yeah, it'll stay. If you try to put it up here, it's going to swap. So anyway, it's reflexive. So you can put these things wherever you want to. So what I want to do now is let's play with some of the other types of graphs that I have. And let me show you some of these graphs. So now what I'm going to do is go into my dashboard list. And you can get there by clicking this. And it'll show you starred dashboards, recent dashboards, and all the general ones. So one of the things I use with my weather is the wind rows. And let me load that up here. You can do it. There it goes. All right, so obviously I didn't save the dashboard that I just came from, so I'm going to go ahead and save that now. And it always asks you if you want to put down what you've changed. If I don't know what I changed on the dashboard, then I don't fill this out. If you're working in a collaborative environment, you probably want to fill this out, but I think most of us are just playing around. I'm not going to save the time range or anything, just save the dashboard. Okay, so now we're in the new weather dashboard. This is an example of a dashboard that I've created that is specifically for my weather station. And if you have a weather station in your backyard, on your house, wherever, I have a video that I created where I pull the weather data that's transmitted directly from the weather station using a Raspberry Pi and an SDR, little SDR receiver. I don't even have nothing to show here, but a little SDR USB thing. It listens to 915 megahertz and it pulls in my data and decodes it. And then I plot it into Home. I bring it into Home Assistant using MQTT, and then I plot it here. So I have all these values either returned from the weather station or calculated as sensors. So here we have single stats. All these boxes are single stats. We have the line graphs we talked about, more line graphs, more line graphs, more line graphs. We also have a wind rose down here. This one's a fun one. This plots my wind direction and also has a little bit of speed to it. Thanks, Bob. I love this. This is one of my favorite dashboards today. I always like tinkering, so tomorrow might be a different one, but this is a lot of fun, especially when I'm curious. My favorite use of this dashboard is when the weather is changing. And you can see right here that our humidity has been pretty consistent since yesterday at 7 o'clock. And then now we're starting to see a drop in humidity. And correlating to that probably is a temperature increase maybe. But you can see things like the wind direction. I plot the wind direction two different ways. I plot it this way as a line. And then if you look at the way I set my graph, and as I go through these, by the way, make sure you ask me questions. I'm watching Discord. I'm watching the chat here. So either place is fine. I think if I talk in Discord, it actually shows in the chat. I don't know if Tim, it says Tim H078. If you're not on my Discord server, jump on there. You can see what I'm talking about. But Tim was asking whether he should have a Nook, use a Nook for Home Assistant. This one has a 500 gig SSD and 4 gig of RAM, expandable to 8. So good luck, Tim, on that. I watched one of the YouTube channels. It's called Bite My Bits. He does some random stuff, but mostly he's this Plex guy, and I know I'm getting off a little bit here, but he can run 20 plus concurrent streams on his Nook server. And I have my Plex running on my Synology NAS, a DS918 Plus, which somewhere there's a video in my video stuff here with that too. Anyway, I run that and I can get about 2 streams, I think. So I keep thinking I want to get a Nook, but what he asked is a Nook, and I don't know if he's on the call here or not. But I think a Nook, and Bob, you can tell me too, but a Nook might be overpowered for Home Assistant. I'm running in fact, you can see it. Let me just grab this over here. I'm running all of this stuff on my Home Assistant. So I've got AdGuard, probably takes a little bit of power since I have a lot of devices doing DNS. Bitwarden, not so much. Grafana, of course. You're watching what I'm doing on these videos using this device. Node-RED, OpenZ-Wave, Portainer, Unify, Controller, etc. All of that is running on an Intel. Oh, I think I just closed Discord. That was fun, wasn't it? It's running on an i5, little mini desktop, which I'm assuming maybe Bob is close to that. But well, good golly, where's my Discord going? There we go. So I'm running an i5 33 gig with 4 gig of memory, and it works great. I do all my stuff. I was running a Raspberry Pi, but I don't think I could get away. I guess that's something I should mention. When I'm talking about doing Influx and Grafana and all this stuff, number one, I wouldn't try to run Influx or any database on the SD card of a Raspberry Pi. That just, number one, you're going to lose your data flat out. Those SD cards are going to die. If you're continually writing to that SD card, if you have no other storage on your Raspberry Pi device, And if you have a power failure, you're going to end up losing stuff. It's just going to quit and it's going to fail and all that other stuff. So a long time ago, I moved to just this desktop. It's got a UPS backup on it, but it also is not prone to SD card failure. So as we talk about all this stuff here today, make sure that you're not using your SD card to run Influx and all this other stuff. So little disclaimer there. All right. So I was talking about these graphs. I was going to tell you on here, one of the things I did for, come on, click it. The slowness you see here is not my device. It's actually my laptop. I'm running all this stuff on at once. What I did for the min and max is 0 to 360 degrees. And the reason I do that, obviously, is I want to know north all the way through north again. So 0 through 360 degrees. And so it plots this stuff on the graph, and I can watch the wind as it comes in. Obviously, the wind is there's no wind here. So I correlate these two graphs, wind speed to wind direction. And then, of course, I have the rows down here. The thing about the rows, the wind rows, is I don't understand the coloring of the wind rows, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if I edit this particular wind rows thing, hey Tony, on a Pi 4 with SSD. Now I'm okay with that. I want to know if a Pi 4 can do all of this stuff. I would definitely do the SSD and not the SD card. Bob says if the i5 is too much, you can set up Proxmox, run other stuff. Oh yeah, you bet. In fact, I'm running on that same device that runs my Home Assistant. I actually have another container that is running. I forgot about this. It's running something else. I completely forget about what it is, but we got Home Assistant running, of course, all the Docker containers for that, because I'm running supervisor version of Home Assistant. And then I've got the other stuff, something else running. I forget what it is. I should look into that, because if something, if it fails in the house, something stops working, and I'm looking around for the cause. It could be that thing I forget's running on the Docker container. Okay, so on this coloring thing, I want the color, and I know it's really hard to see now because it's squished it down, but there's different colors. There's kind of really dark red and kind of like a peach or pinkish looking color. And you can choose the color. Where's it at? Where's my color stuff? This is the color type. Where in the world is my coloring? Oh, here's the color. So it's default now. But if I go through and I choose these different colors, I don't know if you can really see that, but it doesn't seem to me to correlate to it's hard to see. It may do this. It may actually correlate to the number of points in a specific region on the graph and then how old they are. But if I'm looking at this graph, this wind rows, and it's just the way I visualize things, y'all probably are just fine with it. Let's say I use this one. Oh, that's gross. It looks like some sort of well, it's gross. I'm not going to use that one. Let's do, oh, come on now. I'm trying to find like a 3. Well, here's a 2 color. We'll go back to red blue, which looks like default. All right, so let me go back over to this screen, and now you see red blue. I don't know what these colors mean. So if I'm looking at the last 2 hours, and by the way, let me show you how I do that while we're here. If you take this, this is true for any graph. Under query options in this version of Grafana, you can set the time here to what you want the time to be, and it will show up here, or you can hide that. If I hide time info, that goes away. But I don't want to look at 24 hours of wind, and it's because, like I said earlier, I like to see if there's a front coming through. I want to see that wind shift around, and so if I'm looking at 24 hours of data, the graph is unusable. So I look at 2 hours. And if the front comes through, you should start to see those plots come off. So that's how you set this. You can do this for any type of graph. You can default it to a specific amount of time. And when you change the time up here, if I change this to 1 hour, for example, all these graphs that are not set to that time are going to change, but this one is going to stay. And you can do that for any graph you want to do that for. So anyway, that's a long story for the windrows. I'm not really sure how to correlate the colors to what they mean. It looks like there's a bunch here, which might be when the wind was really, well, this is 2 hours. So let's look at 2 hours on this graph and see if it makes any sense. Or let's just do 3 hours. So if I look at my wind direction here, I see that it's mostly 100 degrees for the last 2 hours. Now we're starting to see some plots. So I think the wind is shifting a little bit here. And look at that dew point fall. 100 degrees. So that is around this area. So you see a lot of that right here. So now we're starting to see some up here. But see, this is like light gray or whatever. And these are all red. So what does that mean? That's a long story to say I really don't understand this plot. So I create 2 of them. That's a nice visualization to tell if it's majority from the north, we have a north wind. If it's a majority from the south, we have a south wind. Up here, I can look over time. Go back to 24 hours here. I can go over time here, and I can just kind of see what the wind has done over the last 24 hours. It was pretty quiet overnight, and then it started picking up this morning. And then I do this thing right here where over this last 24 hours, I picked the max speed out of all of these. And so over the last 24 hours in my location, I've had 5.1 miles per hour. The other thing about this max wind thing too, where my weather station is I'm a little bit lower. And so I'm not going to get as much wind as somebody who has a weather station who's up on a roof or something. So the wind may be actually less than what really is out there. I talked about these thresholds. So if you look at dew points, just in general, dew points themselves become comfort levels change as you get higher in the dew points or lower in the dew points. So I set these as to be yellow and red. If it's in this yellow range, it's slightly muggy, a little less comfortable. And then if it's up here, it's almost getting into the dangerous zone for dew points. So I set these as a quick visual indicator of what the dew point or what I should feel like outside or whatever. So that's what I do here. Let's look at a few more graphs and ask me questions about these things as you're going along. Ask me questions about anything Home Assistant, and I will answer the ones I know, and I will tell you I don't know what you're asking on anything else as well. So feel free to this is a Q&A session as much as anything else, as we're just chatting. Although I'm doing most of the chatting today, but if you have questions about anything, just throw it out here. Environment, quick glance. Let's see what quick glance has. And I made changes on that dashboard. I'm not going to save any of those. So we'll discard those. This was one I originally built when I was doing things early on in Home Assistant. Some of it doesn't make sense anymore, but you can see these gauges. So let's take a look at just this outside one, for example. This is just a gauge, a standard gauge visualization. Same thing occurs. Fahrenheit where NDID is, and this is actually my ambient API temperature. So not only do I pull the temperature directly from the device, I also pull it from the ambient weather API, which sometimes goes down, and I want to make sure I can still get my own weather. That's why I pull it directly. So this is a leftover from that. But the gauge is, it's just a gauge thing, and you can come down here under field, and you can set different thresholds. So from 0 to 40, it's kind of this bluish color. From 40 to 60, it's this other bluish color. 60 to 85, it would be green, and then above 85 would be red. So you can color code these graphs for an easy visual indication of what's going on. Now I spend a lot of my time in my Home Assistant dashboard, and so this isn't as relevant as it used to be. But here's an interesting graph that I do use sometimes. If I want to see what motion is occurring through my motion sensors and at what point, I graph these on this graph. And by the way, you can take any graph and click on View, and it'll just put that as a singular graph on the screen. So I plot the study, kitchen, front hall, and upstairs motions. And I do this using a rewrite rule in Node Red that puts these values as different values on the graph. So for example, and there's a whole video on that. You can do that too. But the front hall, anytime I get front hall motion, these are all sensors or binary sensors. It's either 1 or 0, on or off, right? So how do you make it show up on a graph like this? Well, you rewrite or you change the value of the sensor to something else, and that's what I do in Node-RED, and I suppose I could just show you that instead of talking about it. If you've seen the video that I've done on this, you know what I'm talking about. But I write the front hall is 1. I write the upstairs is 1.5. This one is going to be 2, and this one is going to be 2.5. So that way they actually show up on separate lines on the graph. If you didn't do that, all of these sensors would just show motion on a single line on the graph. So under Node-RED, the way I do that under motion actions is I use a change node. So this is just basically on or off. So if the sensor is on, in this case the garage sensor, which probably isn't even on that, is it? It might be. It's just not on this. Well, it's not working. Anyway, the garage, or let's say the kitchen, right? I make that a 2.0. So through a change node on Node-RED, I go from, if it's on, it sends it on this path. And then in this change, oops, I was doing kitchen, wasn't I? In this change node, all I do is I take the message payload, I set the message payload to 2, and then I send that on to Grafana. And what I send it to in Grafana is the kitchen motion measurement. So one of the things that you can do if you're using Node-RED is you can create custom measurements and put them into Influx. And that's exactly what this is. And the server obviously is going to be my Influx DB server. You can set these things up here, and you can connect back to Home Assistant. And in this case, I'm using the IP address. I'm using the Home Assistant database. There's my username and my password I created for this particular Node-RED instance to talk to Influx. And so you just set up the server. That way, you choose the measurement that you're going to send this to, and then of course give it a name. And so now anytime there's kitchen motion, instead of being 1 on or off, or 0 or 1 if it's binary, it changes it to 2. And then when I look at my graph, now I have kitchen motion as a 2 on my graph. So you can rewrite these things to do what you wouldn't think would be normal, just number measurements. You can rewrite them to show specific values for something that's occurring within your Home Assistant instance. And motion, all this does for me is it just tells me which sensors are active at any one time. And of course, you can put together a picture of what's going on in the house by looking at the sensors. One other thing to note too is that this sensor, this is a wired sensor, so this pretty much is constant motion. This was waffles this morning for breakfast, so this is all waffle making and cleanup. And then of course this is this is a battery sensor, but it's updating pretty frequently too, which is interesting. Same thing can happen with door events. I rewrite door events. So if a specific door is open or closed, it will plot that on here. So I can actually tell you when the door is open or closed. So under door actions, under Node-RED, if a door is open, you can see here where it shows open, it sets the value to 3.5. If it's closed, it sets the value to 3. And this is using the same measurement. So this measurement is called garage door. It writes that to Influx, and it writes these 2 values. So if the door opens, it gets a, let's see, if the door closes, it gets a 3. If it's open, 3.5. So, higher, garage door higher up is open, lower, you get it. So now I can look at my Grafana database or Grafana graph and see that when the door was opened. If I click on garage door only, it just filters down to that. So it was opened at 9:49 and closed at 9:50. And you can see when doors were left open. There are so many things. I mean, you just have to use a lot of imagination. You can take in Node-RED, for example, and I know a lot of people do this directly in Home Assistant, same thing can occur, but you can take this garage door open and start a timer. I do that with my refrigerator door. You can start a timer, and if this timer elapses 2 minutes, for example, I get an alert on all my Alexa, my Echo devices, and then I also get a notification for pushover and do that. So I know we're getting off topic, but I think it's kind of cool that you can do so much. Just have to use a little bit of imagination. All right, so there's that. And one of the other cool things, so we have a lot of, gauge graphs here, and we have some other things that we've seen already. You can see under, I'm going to use demo, I think it is, another type of graph you can use, which here's that same motion stuff, only it's plotted on one of those graphs that I showed earlier, or one of those visualizations I showed earlier. Discrete value, I think it is. I don't even see it. What's interesting is when I go back and look at these, I can't tell you what kind of panel this is. I know it's one of the ones I put in, but I use this to show motion, same motion as I was showing before. This is last 6 hours. What's interesting to me is that, see, it's last 1 hour. Actually. So this is just the last 1 hour. If I were to change this or down here to query options to remove that relative time and go with 24 hours and take the focus away, you should, see, this looks just like that graph that I showed before. And so I'm still plotting the same things. It just happens to be on a different type of graph. Or let me apply that. And then another thing I do is I can watch and see. A lot of this came about whenever we first started having to do homeschooling and staying at home, and I didn't want the kids getting into watching stuff on TV or whatever, and I was working, so I couldn't really watch what they're doing all the time. But I could see it on here if I had a graph going in the background. I can see what particular thing is being watched on a device within the house, on a Roku device. So I have my living room, I have my playroom, and then of course the study and all that. And it tells me which things have been active and how long they've been active. And if you join the stream late, let me show you what I'm talking about with that. If you go to Grafana, nope, that's a lie. If you go to add-ons under supervisor, add-on store, and you look at the dashboard for the stuff installed, and I go to Grafana here. Under configuration, I have installed the discrete panel, the status map, the clock, which I haven't used anywhere, simple JSON I haven't used, and then the WinRows. So the discrete and the status map are these two things we're talking about. This is discrete, and this is a little bit more complicated because you can't just use the visual editor to pull out a query on this. You actually have to go in and write the query by hand. And I'll show you what this query looks like, I think. There it is. So you can see it here, but really it doesn't work unless you look at it here. So what I'm doing is selecting the last value from the living room Roku, where time filter, and then I group by time interval with a fill of none. And when I was playing with this initially, I couldn't get this to work unless I wrote the query directly like this. And also another cool thing is that you can see on here that you have the amount of time in this, whatever time frame, last 6 hours. 2 of those hours have been YouTube. Roku is like and I default this to kind of a muted background when it's just on the Roku home screen. So it's been sitting on the Roku home screen for an hour or whatever. And then a Prime Video for an hour. So an hour of Prime and 2 hours of YouTube on this particular device in the last 6 hours. Yes, my kids are watching TV while I do live streams because it's the weekend. All right, so I'm not getting a lot of questions this morning. I'm hoping for some more questions about, you can ask me about the Nest stuff, the never-ending Nest stuff. Ask me about anything I'm doing in Home Assistant. Ask me about the graphs. Ask me about it. Is anybody having problems with this? Is anybody using this stuff? Throw me some questions here in the comments here so I can answer those for you. I'm running a little bit longer than normal, which is on purpose because I don't have an obligation to go to this morning. So this is cool. I'm going to plug the Home Assistant conference again here real quick. So if you go to configuration, you don't have to do it this way. You can go directly to the site. home-assistant.io/conference. That is tomorrow. They have these, the keynote's going to be by Paulus. Where's it at? Paulus, founder of Home Assistant, is going to give the opening and closing keynotes, and they'll have a lot of tracks. So you have main stage, advanced user stage, and developer stage. And these are different tracks you can go to. And I'm assuming these times are probably not central, because that would be really late. But I could be wrong. Oh, here we go. Central European time. Right. So these are times, CE times. So this would be, for me, 6. That would be like noonish or so. But the cost is $1, $1 US. It's to cover the cost of this hosting platform that they're using, or streaming platform. So if you're new to Home Assistant, go check this out. If you've been a Home Assistant for a while, go check it out. Is it fairly easy to set up HA data to point to a non-integrated Grafana? Yeah, sure. When I initially set up Home Assistant, I set it up to, why do I have 2 Visual Studio codes? Squirrel! I set it up to point to a server I have because I didn't want my Raspberry Pi trying to do all the work. It couldn't actually. So what you do, whoa, that's the wrong screen, guys. Sorry about that. That made some people dizzy probably. All right, let me go back to what I was looking at here. Let me drag this over here. All right, so if you're using an external Influx instance, you can point your Influx to whatever your host is on your Influx Db server. So yes, you can put the data to some other server. That's super easy to do. And you can run Grafana on the same device or whatever. You can even tell Grafana, if you're going into your data sources for Grafana, under configuration, not there. Let me get back over here. If you go to configuration or settings in Grafana to your data sources, you can also choose whatever your data source is. You just put the location of the data source. So if I chose Influx, for example, I would put the URL here for your Influx database server. So you can choose whatever data source you want. You can choose to send data from Home Assistant to whatever place you want to do that. So I'm still running an SD card. Is all the extra logging likely to cause issues? Dramatic pause. Yes. I'm not going to say likely. I'm just going to say at some point you're going to have an issue with writing to the SD card. SD cards are notorious for failure. You know, you could get away with it. Now, I will, knock on wood, I've got 4 Raspberry Pis running in the attic. In the summertime, my attic gets to be 120 degrees plus, and they're running on the SD card. I've had a failure or 2, so I'm okay with that. But what I'm not doing is continuous logging of data, like something like this, where every 16 seconds, for example, I log a data point for my outside weather. Actually, I log multiple data points for my outside weather station. So I'm writing to at least every 16 seconds. The problems occur primarily on SD cards when you lose power and you're writing to the SD card. You just suddenly corrupt that thing. So I know Raspberry Pis have come a long way, and you can do a lot of things. They're powerful, but writing this kind of thing, Influx or database stuff to SD card, I wouldn't do it personally. I would try to come up with some external storage for it. There's a big thing going on now with booting off of SSDs. That might be something I try as soon as I get an SSD, where you can boot off the SSD and run it off the SSD, and that's gonna be fine for this kind of thing. I would like to try that. I would like to know how that goes, because that one i5 that I have running all of this now, it's fine, but it takes more power than a Raspberry Pi, which means my backup time is shorter. For whatever reason, the disk is just noisy. I've got a regular magnetic disk on it. It's just noisy, and it sits in the study all day long, just chirping away, and it just gets annoying after a while. So I know I could fix that some other way, put an SSD on that thing or whatever. But I would like the smaller footprint, the less power draw, the less heat created, and just see what it does. So yeah, I would definitely get off a SD card and not do this on an SD card if you can help it, and go with something more along the lines of a SSD or something like that. And people are doing it. There are videos out there now of people booting off the SD card or SSDs. I read a little bit about it. Your boot time might be slower. You might have initial issues. It takes a little bit of work to get it going, but then after you do that, it's fine. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think you can boot off the SD card and then have your primary storage as the SSD. And then you're writing everything to the SSD. If it fails, if the SD card fails, you just reinstall the boot part of it, and then you go back to the SSD. So if anybody else has comments on that, feel free to throw that in there. But that's my take on that based on the little bit of knowledge I have. I had a thought, but I forgot what my thought was. Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. Ain't that great? All right, so let me just go through and see if there's any other funny stuff I've done here. I think I was going to show you. Well, let me get back to Grafana. I am on Grafana. Let me get back to the dashboards. We did that. We did that. We did demo, new weather. I don't think there's any other types of fancy graphs that I'm using right now. These are just some other type graphs that I'm using. They're all line graphs, essentially. Some that have no data in there because I have moved on and have not gone back to clean those up. My two go-tos right now are this demo, which I need to rename to something else, where I can look at motion and then watch this stuff down here. I also can look at my upstairs and downstairs thermostat activity when the heater or let's see if it's run in the last 7 days. So the air conditioning or heating has run, and yeah, here you can see it. So this is again the same kind of graph as this one above here. This is discrete, and this is going to be the other one, I think. But I can take and put the air conditioning and heating on the graph to tell me when those run. I don't necessarily need to know that, but it's always cool. And one of the things that kind of drove that early on when I was doing this a different way is that when you look at your Nest stuff, it only gives you a window of like 7 days of history that you can look at on the app. That may have changed long ago. I just don't care. I don't look at that app. What I do look at is if I want to know, did it get cold enough for the heater to kick on or whatever? Well, I can look and see how long did the air conditioner run, because in Texas, where I live, my air conditioner could run as much as 12 hours a day nonstop. So I like to see how much use that thing is getting. Those who live in latitudes or whatever who don't have air conditioning probably just flipped out about that. But yeah, it does run for long periods of time, and it's designed to just be the right size for the house. So it runs enough to keep the humidity down, because we have high humidity in Texas in the summer, and keep it cool. So it's designed to run a long period of time. Have you imported any dashboards from the Grafana site before? I had issues. I imported my brother's dashboard once. Yes, actually. So let me show you that here. If I go to, let me find it. Dashboards, manage maybe. Let me just see if you can import here. So you can take a dashboard and you can take the JSON. Now, I don't know that I've done it from grafana.com directly, Tony, but I have pasted the JSON in here, and I've actually exported it to people, some of my dashboards, and I haven't heard anything wrong with it. So if I go back to, if I click on, let's say, this new weather. Okay, come on now. Click on settings up here. And if I want to export it, actually what you do is you click on the JSON model and you copy all of this. So I just do Control A and I copy the whole thing. And then let's say I want to show you all my whatever. I'll go to something like a Ubuntu paste bin. And I will just paste it in here as JSON. And I'll just put in whatever, I don't care. And then I'll save it or paste it. And now here's my entire dashboard. And if you copy this in like this to your Grafana, where'd it go? you should see this dashboard. Now, what you probably will see a lot of is blank stuff, because if you take somebody else's dashboard and your entities aren't the same as theirs, it's just going to be a bunch of blanks. You'll have to go through and add the entities for the things, change the entity values to what your actual entities are. But yeah, I haven't really had issues with it. Are you talking about, okay, I've imported directly from Grafana with HU, may have just been disregarded. So yeah, so I'm going to mispronounce this. Thieslo says he has done it, so that's good. I've imported JSON and I've exported JSON and sent it off, and it seems to be okay. So I don't have issues with that. What was I doing here? I was just looking through, my go-to dashboard. So my demo dashboard was one, and I was showing you that. Let me go back to that real quick. I want to show the actual dashboard, how I do this air conditioning stuff. Because I put both cold and hot on the same thing. You could see that I had a red bar and a blue bar for what was running. So I'm selecting state. This is where it gets a little tricky for the air conditioning. To me, this is not intuitive. Select state from state, where the entity ID is the upstairs HVAC state. And then, of course, time filter is this time filter. So the way I differentiate cold and hot is I come down here and I do color mappings. So if the return value coming from this state is cooling, it's going to make it this color, which is, this hex code. If it's off, the RGB is going to be this, and the RGB is going to be that kind of muted color that you can't really see, because I only want to be highlighted. I only want it to highlight when it's on or off. And then, of course, if it says heating, that's when I'm going to get this here. And so I'm able to differentiate on the same graph, whether it's cooling or heating, based on the color mappings and the text value of the state that I get back from it. The same thing can be done for this right here. Let me do this one. If I go down to color mappings here, I have home as, and these two I set, so it's 0, 0, 0. So you can see here that it's all dark. I don't want anything to show up on here if it's either on the Roku, like the home screen, the idle screen, or if it's sitting in the home mode. So I just blank those out. So what I do though is this is automatically created. I could change these color values down here if it said, let's say if I wanted to say, if it says YouTube, for example, I can make this red. And now you can see right there that anytime YouTube is playing, it can be red. I just let it pick its own colors, but I could make it red because YouTube typically is that red button or whatever. So now I'll just apply it and save it. One of the things I noticed with these particular visualization types is once you make a change, you need to actually refresh the entire page, because I think it reloads the CSS in the background. And so you have to reload that in order for it to show the changes. And we'll go back to demo here. It should be red. Crossing fingers. Yep. So on this graph anyway, at least now, whenever it's YouTube, it'll be red, and then it'll just pick any random color for the others that are on here. One of the things that's good for setting a specific color is if you're visual and you look at a graph and you can't read the words, like I can see it's YouTube, but if I'm far away and I see big splotch of red, I know right away that's YouTube. Also, if you change the time range, so if you come up here and you change the time range and you add another value in here, let's say we have YouTube, Prime Video, and let's say we have Disney Plus or something. If you do that, then these colors could change, because then it's going to randomly pick the color that it sets for these. So by setting a color specific to each type of thing you're looking at, no matter how far out the color or the time range is, the color will always be for that particular thing. I hope that makes sense. All right, more questions? Any questions? Let me check Discord, because I minimized that by accident. Some chats on there for the Docker stuff. Oops, let me get this out of the way. If you're not on my Discord server, it's pretty quiet, but you can get on there and ask questions or just do whatever you'd like. Those of you familiar with Discord will know what it is. To me, it's just a chat platform that has a lot of cool features to it. Like we could do the live stream chat stuff now. And then there's bots that do funny stuff or interesting things or whatever. So well, let's see. Let's just kind of do a little recap here. We went through and we talked about Influx, getting that installed, and then setting up Influx in here in the configuration.yaml, making it point to the correct host on the correct port with the correct database, the correct username and password. And then I set the default measurement state. If you go to Home Assistant, if you search for Influx and Home Assistant, you'll see a whole bunch of other options you can put within here. So make sure that's set, make sure it's installed as the add-on. Then we went through and we checked on making sure that we're seeing measurements in here. So one way to do that, I'll just close these queries out, add a query, and we'll click on meta query. These are some built-in queries. Show measurements. Make sure you select the database name that you created. This is mine. It doesn't necessarily mean that's your database. And if you see a table of values show up here, you know that data is getting into your Home Assistant instance. You can also come down here and pick that same database, typically AutoGen. This AutoGen and this Infinite are different retention policies. As I said earlier on the stream, I'm not going to get into the details of retention policies. To me, that's complicated, and I haven't figured out necessarily the right way to do that. So some of these are kind of played around with. But we want to look at, let's just say we want to look at Fahrenheit, and then I want to look at values. And we can see that there are values all up until right now. The latest is on the top. So I know I'm getting values into this particular database. So make sure all that's working. And then of course you come over to Grafana. Make sure you set up your data source. That's your first thing you have to do. Oh, and I didn't go into users. Under Influx, you need to create a database and create users. Look back in the video if you missed that. Come over here, set up your data source. So add a data source, whatever it happens to be, in this case, Influx. You would set your Influx database address as the HTTP. This is if you're using Influx in containers on a supervised Home Assistant installation. It would be HTTP, and then the URL of the Influx container. You can find that by clicking on Influx up here, and it's this ID right here, basically the Docker container stuff. And you would put that in here as your URL with the port, which I think is 8086 by default. I think so, that's right. And then of course the username and password. Save and test. If it comes back good, you're good. And then from there, you just start building. Dashboards. So, questions, comments, anything you would like to learn about today? I'd say we go for another. What time is it? 11. Another 10 minutes or 5 or 10 minutes, depending on if there's any activity. If not, we'll end it. But welcome the snow jumped on Discord, probably coming from the chat here, or coming from the stream. Anything Home Assistant related you want me to talk about? Let's look at the dashboard for inspiration. I love looking at the dashboard. This is my new favorite toy. I built this all using grid cards in version 118 plus. And so if you have missed that video, that's a good video. I make a number of videos. Some of them I think are better quality than others. I'm a pretty harsh critic of myself. I think the grid card one is pretty good. I like that grid card one. So go watch that one. If you have any questions about anything here you see in the next minute or two, let me know on chat. If you want to know how I did something or want to know whatever it means, let me know about that. Obviously, as we saw on the graph, the YouTube is active on the living room Roku. The back door is currently unlocked. The Christmas tree is lit up and the study light is on. I'll turn that study light off. And then when I do that, of course, my home feed card updates immediately. So we went over Grafana. We went over that. Make sure if you're going to attend the conference tomorrow, you jump in and you register for the conference. I think it'll be a lot of fun. This platform has grown a lot. I think there will be some discussion about version 1.0 of Home Assistant. Currently, we're on 1.18, I believe. Just double check that here. Oh, I'm checking to see if there's updates. What I'm doing. Yeah, there's no updates, but I am on. That's not going to tell me. Let me go down here. I always forget where this is at, where I'm supposed to find the information. So I'm on 1.18.5, and since the conference is tomorrow, I'm not sure at all, but I'm really guessing that we're going to have an announcement about 1.0. I'm trying to make a new device sensor to track pets that is just manually triggered through buttons. Is there a way to override turn on and turn off on a sensor? Well, I think that let me read it again. I'm trying to make a new device sensor to track pets. It's manually triggered through buttons. So I guess I need to know more about what that thing is, what kind of sensor it is. There's a way to override turn on and turn off on a sensor. Like you don't want it to show when it's turned on or off. I'm confused about that one. Ask that differently, or ask it a little way, because I'm not sure what that means. What kind of sensor is it, I guess, is another question. Is there a way to override turn off? Samuel Maestrillo has subscribed. Hello, Samuel. Well, he may not be here, just subscribed. Well, but thanks for subscribing. Appreciate it. And that is one thing I added. That alert box. I thought that was cool. So that's the first time I've seen that used. Anyway, yeah, I'm not sure what kind of sensor that is or how you would override that. I guess I need to know a little bit more about the sensor, and then maybe from there we can answer that question. Anyway, for the conference tomorrow, they're probably going to talk about 1.0. Template sensor. So how are you tracking, when you say tracking a pet, I'm thinking of like some sort of GPS thing that you've put on your pet. And I'm not sure what would you go over, would you go over and touch the pet, say you're here, or that's what I'm confused about. So you're just saying no hardware. What are you tracking on the pet specifically? And using a template sensor. So I have a lot of template sensors, but I'm not sure how I'd specifically do what you're asking for. Details, please. Details. Let me go back to the dashboard. I was inspiring people from my dashboard. If you have any questions about Node-RED or anything like that, I do know what I want to ask. And this is where I would really appreciate some feedback. What would you like to see done on a live stream? What would you like me to see done on a live stream as far as the Home Assistant stuff that I talk about? So we've got Node-RED, Grafana, Influx, not a lot of stuff in Influx. Dashboard building, some of the specific stuff that I do, like the switches, the weather station stuff. Somebody asked about Blue Iris. I'm probably going to work on a video for Blue Iris. But let me know in the comments what you would like to see as far as live stream videos. What would be interesting to you? Because I enjoy doing it, but if the content is not fun for y'all, then it's not worth doing, right? So I would like to do something that y'all would like to see. I just want to basically trigger from the dashboard to note the pet going outside. Oh. So, yeah, you could create a toggle. You could create what would you do with this once you got it? Where would it go? Would it go in a database to show what time something occurred as far as pushing a button? So we could add a button to this. Well, first of all, you'd create a sensor, right? So if we went into, we're going to create a quick sensor here, I think. Let me drag this out of the way so I can make sure there's not something weird on here when I go to this page. Grossy to-do list, Google Calendar integration would probably be good. I think I'm just getting started on those. Google Calendar is a bit involved though. You know, that might be something to play with because I've never done Google Calendar. But I always have reason to have a notes. If I have this dashboard up all the time, it would be nice to have a little calendar aspect to it. I'm trying to get to the bottom of my sensor page here. We let the cats outside on the deck. So this is more, we don't forget the cats outside for hours on end and go to bed. Oh, interesting. So, yeah, you could probably set a sensor or a text value or something. I'm going to have to think about that because I need a tie some sort of entity to it. So let's see if I want to create a sensor called I don't know. Let's try to build this real quick. This could be a fail. Live stream building something I haven't messed with before. So platform. So I'm in my sensors file, so it's really sensor and then platform template. Oh yeah, I could do something like this. Sensors. I wonder if y'all can see that. Whoa, slow down. Sensors, and then we'll call it cat outside, for lack of a better term. And friendly name is going to be cat outside. And then from there, this is where I'm got to think a second what we would call this. I think you just create this sensor in general. And then now the one thing about creating this is I would have to restart TensorFowl. Walter Bell, welcome Walter Bell. Thank you for subscribing, Walter Bell. Your name is now on my live stream. I read that at first. Sensor, okay. So if we just create this sensor, I don't know that would do this as a template though. Let me just come up here. These are all templates, just a random sensor. Yeah, I hope there's not something that's going to show up in here that is going to show my passwords for everything. Okay, so the one thing you have to do now is restart, and that to get this to show up. And I've just created a sensor, but let's just see. I'm going to save it and see if it complains about this. So now I would go over to configuration, just check my, under server controls, check my, yeah, see, it doesn't like that. So you need something to create a sensor. And I'm just looking here. Let me drag this off a little bit again so I don't share all my secrets here. I know there's got to be a way to create a sensor that's just a blank sensor. I do this with text values. Like I could set a text value, and if the text value is cat or out or something, then it would just set that as that value. But I'm going through here just to see if there's a way to set just a straight up, not a template value, but just a sensor. And well, let's do this. This is what I do when I don't know something. You know, I'm sure we all do this. Create blank sensor. This ought to be easy, right? Create blank sensor. Can I create an empty dummy binary sensor? Well, there we go. Can you? Can we? Can we do it? Can we load this page? Am I stuttering? Is my video choppy? Okay. Any kind of binary sync is actually going to different blah, 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 blah. Okay. Okay. I don't think that's what we're looking for. Value template. So I want a completely blank center. Let's see what this shows here. Input Boolean. Yeah, maybe. That would probably be, I mean, it's really going to be a Boolean value. It's going to be either the TensorFlow is outside or the TensorFlow. TensorFlow. Either the cat's outside or inside. It's going to be yes or no. So let's create an input Boolean. That'll be easy enough. How do you do that? 2K L strong? Is that I strong? L strong 2K? How do you do an input Boolean? Throw me the code. Let's see who's faster. Oh, how do I do that? Google faster, or is my chat faster? I can't spell Boolean. There we go. Let's make one of these things. So we just created, yeah, there we go. We'll just do that. That's easy enough. They pull a value from a hardware sensor, which I don't have. Yeah, so input Boolean, is it Theslo? I'm going to call you Theslo. I hope it's right. Input Boolean is what you want to do, really. So we'll just call it that. We'll get rid of this other thing that we have. And in configuration.yaml, we will first of all find a blank spot on that. Come down here to the bottom, and we will paste in an input Boolean. Apologies if moving this stuff around is making my screen totally choppy. All right, so we're gonna call this cat outside again. Probably need to remove that other thing I created in the sensor file, don't I? Cat outside, name, notify. That's too long. It's a cat outside. Oh, like through the UI? You can configure this through the UI? I still think that's too long. Cat. I wonder if there's a cat icon. All right, so let's do that, and let's get rid of the one I put in the sensors file so we don't have a problem with that. Bye-bye. Save that. Go over here to Home Assistant. No whammies. All right. So here's the thing. Like, you can restart a lot of stuff without reloading the whole core, but you cannot restart when you do configuration YAML changes, or you can't do it when you do that. You have to restart it all. So here we go. Bye-bye. Oh, wait. Push the button. Now we shall wait for a second. In the UI, that's interesting. I'll have to, as soon as it returns back to me, I will check the UI and see where that is. Under helpers, you said? Configuration helpers? I will look here in a second. We have lost our connection. Oh, I can't sing on here. I'm in trouble. I will just pretend sing in my mind. I really appreciate all hanging out with me today. This is a lot of fun. I enjoy doing live streams. I just want to make sure that I have good content for y'all. And that it's something worthwhile for y'all to hang out and watch. And it's helpful. By far, that's the biggest thing, right? I want to make sure it's helpful. Okay. Home Assistant is starting. Now, if we are lucky, that thing that I just did will show up as a thing in here. I'm going to search for the word cat. Cat. Wait, maybe it's not done yet. Did I call it cat outside? I did, didn't I? Cat outside. All right, why would I not? Went down there. So Theslo, is that going to work? Because I don't see the input Boolean. Why am I not seeing the input Boolean? L strong. Let me go here to configuration for helpers and just see how that helpers. Add a helper. Check that out. See, this is why we do this. Because I learn just like y'all learn. Now what I can't do is, now look, toggle. Look at this. Let's just call this cat outside toggle. Cat outside toggle. MDI cat. Oh, little kitty. So now I have a cat outside toggle. I don't know. Oh, because these are read only because they're created somewhere else. So with this one, input, oh look, see, it created the input Boolean. So there you go. That is the way. Yeah, toggle helper is fantastic. So if I go back over to my developer tools, I should see input Boolean. Do they show up as a state here? The benefit to this, oh, look at that. Now if I click here, hey, the cat's outside. Oh, the cat's inside. Okay, so now check this out. We'll do this real fast, super fast. So now we have created that. We can go back to our dashboard since we're using the UI to do everything. And I'll put it at the end of this one. So I'll edit this dashboard and edit this card. And since I have modified the YAML, it's not in the mode where I can do, I'm going to do it by hand here. So if I add another card, I'm just going to do it right here. I'm going to call it entity. Type. We're going to do this real time, live on the air. Oh, no, we're not. Type entity. You change state with TensorFlow. You can use a list of camera images to identify the cat. You can then point the camera at the door. When the camera sees the cat, you can. You know what, Bob? Bob, we're gonna have a conversation. You know why? Because when I let my dog out, I have to watch that. I have a glass door, but the blinds are down to the bottom, and I look at that little slit, and if I see the dog there, and I do have a camera pointing at the back door, I want to know how to do what you're talking about. Okay, well, let's finish this. Entity. Entity is going to be what is it called? Binary? No, input Boolean. Back it up. Input Boolean. All right, this is way too slow. Cat outside toggle. And does it show down here? Yes, it does. Excellent. And then I can do name cat outside. And I can make this 3 columns instead of 2. And now my cat outside's over here. We'll save it. We'll get out of the editing mode of the UI. Now all I have to do is cats outside. Now, one thing it's not doing, or that I would prefer for it to do, is not bring that up like that. Rather just click directly from it. So I think what I need to do, instead of more info here, here's what I need to do. Watch this. Edit dashboard. Go back down here and edit that code. And then I'm going to do action toggle, I think. We'll see. So come to the bottom here. And then action is going to be toggle. If that's right. Hurry up and catch up. There you go. Save it. And I apologize if my video is choppy because that seems like it might be. All right, now click it. Oh, come on. It should be toggle. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Oh, well, so you can experiment with that. There's probably a different kind of card you can use to toggle that, like a button card. Oh, you know what? Okay, one more time, one more edit. We'll be good. We need a button card. We don't need a toggle. We don't need an entity card. Edit the dashboard. Go back down here. We're going to change this to a button. And we'll be good to go on this. So instead of entity, let's make it a button. And if we're good, if we're right, yeah, look at that pretty cat picture. Nice. And get out of edit mode here. So now, cat outside. Look, the cat gets all yellow whenever they're outside and gets all whatever. Now what you can do is you can apply that to automations. Let's for example, if I set my alarm to night mode, I'll check the input Boolean. If the cat's outside, I'll have one of my Alexa or Google devices alert me, or I'll get a pushover notice, or whatever way you do it, set off a siren that when you set the night mode on your HA instance, that if this cat is outside, then you get notified. So you can just click that button all day long. Ooh, yay, kitty cat, kitty cat. All right, now I'm losing my mind. All right, so there you go, Bob, Thieslo. That would work. Mail and packages to track when I have deliveries. You know what? That is a perfect thing for this time of year. Where is that? So that is under where, Thieslo? Where do you hide that at? Under integrations, you say? Mail and package? Mail? Nope. Add integration. That is exactly what I'm trying to do. I was thinking Node-RED to start changing lights on and off if the cat is outside for 4 hours or something. Yes, you sure can. This is where we get imaginative, right? You have a sensor, you push a button, it starts a timer. If the timer expires, then you start flashing lights or whatever, set a siren, send yourself a pushover alert, get a text message, whatever you want to do. Yeah, that's not what we're talking about. How are you doing that thing? Mail and packages. Is that a integration? Or is that an add-on? Let me go back over to add-on. I bet it's an add-on. Let me just see. Or you can just tell me. That's going to be supervisor. I don't think it's an add-on. Would they have an add-on for that? Native, mail, packages? No. Yeah, so Thieslo, you have to tell me how that is because I don't know how to do that. But it would be cool to know when stuff's showing up on my dashboard. I love this little cat thing. Kitty cat. No kitty cat. Kitty cat. I do want to have it like, you can't see it here, but one of my cameras points at the back door, and I'd love to see when the dog's at the back door waiting to come in. All right, everybody. Let me see. There was a general comment here on Discord, if that has anything to do with the live stream. Oh, rad cat button. So with that, if there are no other thoughts or comments or questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. It is 11:32 Central Time, and the youngins are going to start asking me what we're going to do for lunch here soon. So I'm going to wrap that up. I really do appreciate everyone that has hung on for the live stream today. Like I said, this is fun for me. I hope it's educational and fun for y'all. I am open for any kind of live streams, ideas that you want me to do. And then, of course, hit me up in Discord. When I'm not live streaming, I'm usually paying attention to that. I've been pretty good up to this point about trying to answer as many questions as I can. Sometimes I just have to say I don't know the answer, but a lot of times I'll research it a little bit and get something for y'all. But Discord's my after chat area, and watch the other videos if you have questions. I have a lot of different things on Grafana and Node-RED if you have questions about those. So with that, I appreciate it. Y'all have a great weekend. Don't forget, tomorrow's the Home Assistant Conference. Jump into that, pick a track, and watch those. I know I just did a virtual conference for my other job, or my job, the one that pays me money. And it's interesting. A lot of work goes into getting those things put together, and I know that this is an open source type project. So a lot of work goes into it to do it, and so when people attend, it's a lot of it's nice to have attendance. So jump in there and do that. So we will see you on the next stream and or next video. I've got some thoughts on videos coming up, so we will do those soon. Thank you very much. And again, have a great weekend. Hit the conference tomorrow. Cheerios.